So he's a VU alumni, right? He studied accounting, tax, and law. I think he can relate a little bit with the whole flowing thing, because he worked in the field for a few years, and then he was like, no, not going to cut it for me. And being a triathlete, a very active triathlete for over 15 years, he decided to follow his passion, right, and change his vision. And he started training as a sports scientist and exercise psychologist. And with his business partner, they started this thing called rework, and they spread knowledge on the mind and body and the connection between those two. And he also lectures on physiology. So he's got a lot of really awesome things to tell us about the mind and body. And so I welcome to the stage, Massimo. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James. Before I start, hey, my name is Massimo. The funny thing is, we, the speakers, haven't met until like 2 days ago, and we had no idea what our topic's gonna be. And I personally can see a common thread among our topics, which I find kind of funny because we haven't talked a word among each other. So I want to take you on a small philosophical journey. My talk's going to be called "The World Beyond Data." There's the first error already because we're not on April 27th today. But we heard Elliot's talk about retrocausalities, and maybe we're in the future already, and it's kind of messed up. So, what do I know? What do I know about the world? So, let me start my argument. We, whether we know it or not, we live in a world that's data. We are surrounded by numbers, ratios, quantifications everywhere. Some are dull and boring, some are a little bit more funny, right? But the world around us, and even we as human beings, become more and more data, right? Less feeling, less intuition, and just more hard, objective measures. And whether that's good or not, and whether you need a sleep score and a recovery score, and that's just plain better than the alternative, and what the alternative might be, well, we're going to talk about that in the next, hopefully not more than 15 minutes, we'll see. So, this is how we perceive the world nowadays, whether we know it or not. Everything's a machine. Has inputs, processing layers, output. The nature, the world around us, animals. We, the human, the mind, is nothing more than a machine. It's just electrochemical processes going on, and we can measure it all and quantify it all and calculate it all and get to some resolution, to some answers, right? That's the materialist, reductive view of the world that we kind of all assume nowadays, whether we're aware of it or not. In fact, the whole world is nothing more than a machine composed of small parts, and if we measure these parts in ever smaller and smaller detail, we gain more knowledge, maybe, or not. And maybe this has some merits. Who of you in here has read Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow? It's like become a classic nowadays. Not too many people, interestingly enough. But some of you maybe have taken classes in behavioral psychology. And these people claim we, the human being, we are a flawed machine, basically, right? Our cognitive processes are not made for the modern world, and thus we have all these biases and heuristic mental shortcuts, and we need objectivity, we need data and measurements in order to navigate the world, otherwise we're just lost. This is the narrative that we've been fed for a long time now. And I don't think it's right, and not just me, but great minds don't quite think that's right. Well, but why do we think that? Why do we live in a world that assumes these things? Maybe it started with Newton back then, his laws of motions and the notion that if only you know all the momenti and the forces that act on the system, you can calculate everything, right? If only you know all the inputs and all the processes and everything's deterministic and linear, then you can calculate the outputs and get to whatever you like, right? So basically algorithms, these things that steer our modern life. You have inputs, you have processes, and these are linear and deterministic, and they always lead to the same thing. And then you have outputs. You can go back and forth. Or reductionism in its core. If you want to understand us, society, human beings, the complex systems that we are, you only have to take us apart. right? We're composed of molecules, cells, and atoms, and these are composed of subatomic particles. And if only we can go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, then we're going to measure the whole world and everything's becoming clear. But you've heard Elliot talk about quantum physics, and even at the most fundamental level, all these things suddenly break apart and we have no clue what's going on. So there's a problem with this worldview, right? And there are two major issues. First is the notion of objectivity. Data is objective. The world is quantifiable, and if I quantify stuff, that's objective and right? I am flawed, I am subjective, but out there is something to be measured. And this rests on the assumptions that there are facts out there, objective facts that just stand on their own, and then there's value, subjective assumptions about the world. And these are two different things. But this is not at all the case. It's quite the other way around. Our values determine the facts that we see, right? The way we look at the world determines what we find. You've heard the other speakers talk about exactly this thing. Remember Ahmed saying, people stand in front of big challenges and they say like, man, I'm never ever be able to overcome this. And then a shift of mindset can change everything. Or remember the double slit experiment. Literally, the way you look at something determines what you find. You look at the double slit experiment, you find one thing, you don't look, there's another outcome. So this is quite literally true. The way we look at the world determines the facts, and they are not two separate things. An example from the business world, right? I've worked in accounting, tax law, and asset management for 1 or 2 years, and I became insanely frustrated by all these numbers and ratios. And I can't even tell you why. It was a gut feeling that kept telling me, this can't be it, right? This over-reliance on numbers and ratios, and they become our God, not our helping hand, but literally the only thing that we pursue. This can't be it, right? And for all of you who are working in finance or even worse, valuation, maybe you feel that kind of frustration as well. As cool and as awesome as it can be, don't get me wrong, I love these sophisticated methods, but if we put them on a pedestal too much, there's a problem with that. I don't know. I think Jerry Mueller, in his book The Tyranny of Metrics, puts it really well, so I'm just going to quote him for a second. When organizations committed to metrics wake up to the fact that there's more to just numbers, that context matters, they typically add more and more performance measures, which then creates a cascade of data that becomes ever less useful, while gathering it sucks more and more resources. And the thing is, because belief in its efficacy seems to outlast evidence that it frequently doesn't work, metric fixation has an element of a cult, right? Studies that demonstrate its lack of effectiveness are either ignored or met with the assertion that what is needed is more and better measurements. Or in other words, we collect data, we want to believe that this is just the better way of doing it, we ignore evidence against this, and just keep adding more and more data and more measurements, with our fingers crossed saying, maybe one day it'll get better, maybe. So, another example. This is Harry Markowitz. He won the Nobel Prize for his optimal portfolio theory. Like you want a specific return, and you're risk averse or risk seeking, and you can calculate your optimal portfolio that way, or build your optimal portfolio that way. And he won a Nobel Prize for his theory. The funny thing is, when it came to him investing for his retirement, what did he do? Gut feeling. It was just fingers crossed, small number of diversified funds, and hope for the best, right? So he didn't, even he, the Nobel laureate, didn't follow his own advice. He went with his gut. So, there's Max Planck saying, anybody who has been seriously engaged in scientific work of any kind realizes that over the entrance to the gates of the temple of science, what a beautiful metaphor, are written the words, "Ye must have faith." One of the greatest physicists of our time claiming, okay, objectivity, fair enough, but you gotta have some faith. And there's feeling and intuition attached to all of this. Second main issue, precision. We assume that if we go deeper and deeper and be more precise and more precise, then things are just going to turn out better. And we're going to see the world in a clearer way. So let me give you an example from us humans, the biology that we compose. So here's a basic model of human metabolism. We eat food, we digest, we produce energy. Great. So there's the saying, every model is wrong, some are useful. This model is wrong and useless because it doesn't tell us anything. So we have to make it a bit more complex, right? Add a bit more detail. Okay. This looks slightly more complex, slightly more complicated, but it still can't be it, right? This is still too simple. Okay, now we're getting here, right? Jesus Christ, what the fuck is going on inside the human body? This is just insanely complex and overly complicated. Well, sorry to disappoint you, but this is more like it. This is more like it, and we're not even there yet, right? This is not even the final layer of the complexity that composes the human body. And the funny thing is, what's happening up there determines what's going on down there, and not in a linear way. Whether you're in a good mood, in a bad mood, whether you had an argument with your spouse, whether you slept good or bad. This determines all these relationships, and calculating what's going on this fundamental level in some deterministic, linear way, this is just not possible. Yeah? Every biologist worth his salt will tell you that. So precision also rests on a wanky foundation. How do we do it differently? What can we do? There's this concept of the Gestalt, quite the opposite of the reductive dream. Huh? The Gestalt is a philosophical concept that means you disengage from the world, and instead of seeing everything composed of bits, right, take block A and B and C and build up the world, you do quite the opposite. You attend to the whole thing at once. You see the Gestalt. You ever heard the saying, the sum is more than the whole is more than the sum of its parts? That's the concept of the Gestalt. Take the picture. If you overly focus on the black dots, you just see black dots and black areas. But if you disengage a bit and try to take in the whole picture as a whole piece, you see, hopefully, the cute little dog, the cute little Dalmatian in the center, right? By the way, people with schizophrenia have a hard time seeing the dog because they are less able to see the whole thing. So, sorry for anyone here. Anyway, so what about the greatest minds in human history, the great physicists of our time, or the great entrepreneurs of our time? What did they do? They didn't follow linear processes and formula and calculated their way to success. If you ask them how they did it, they all tell you similar things. They say, all right, I put in the hard work, I studied, I talked to people, and then in a calm moment, it just came to me. It came to me in a vision, in a dream, in a moment of peaceful rest. I just had this intuition, this gut feeling. That's how they came to their great discoveries. They saw a Gestalt. They didn't build up the world from scratch. They took something in as a whole. We need to do that again more. Albert Einstein saying, all great achievement of science must start from intuitive knowledge. I believe in intuition and inspiration. At times, I feel certain I am right while not knowing the reason. Imagination is more important than knowledge. It is, strictly speaking, a real factor in scientific research. One of our greatest minds ever claiming that his gut feeling to him is more important than his knowledge, than his logical mind, right? So, let me give you a small example from my world, sport and exercise science, right? Human performance. We tend to measure the human body all the way through, right? We have all these cool new ways of measuring everything. Heart rate, what's going on inside your body, how you sleep, your lactate, whatever that means, right? All kinds of complicated measures. People measure everything nowadays, everything. Outside, external metrics, as well as inside, what's going on inside you. And we have to ask ourselves, is this leading us towards a better world, better performance? Not really, not really. Up there, you see the development of sports performance over the years, like the rate of development, which is going down. It slopes down to today, while 180 degrees on the other side, you see the rate of development of technology, how technology progresses. And you see this huge gap between how technology progresses and we as the human, as high performers progress in the world. On the other hand though, what proved over and over again as a reliable, versatile and accurate tool to measure the human, intuition, feeling and imagination. So what do I mean by that? We have all these metrics and measurements of the human body. And what do the best of the best athletes in the world actually use to measure their training? How they feel. Was this training really exhausting on a scale from 1 to 10? How did I sleep on a scale from 1 to 10? A subjective measurement, a completely subjective, gut feeling, intuitive measurement of how I am doing. That's how these top performers, the Eliud Kipchoges of this world, how they do it, right? This is how we used to do it. We write down how we felt during a training. Literally training diaries, reflecting on what we did, putting it out in our own words, and then reflecting on our own words, and get in touch with ourselves and our bodies. These were then later replaced by these logbooks, and nowadays we have these watches and all these metrics that just automatically measure something about you, and then put it on an algorithm, and out comes a number. A single number that's supposed to tell you how you're doing, how you're feeling, and you have no need any longer to actually listen to your body and what's going on. It's a dangerous development that's going on. One of the great exercise physiologists of our time says our biology is a complex result of millions of years of evolution, and our effort to shortcut our biology, with biotechnology are often highly oversimplified and simply a failure. Harsh coming from one of the great exercise physiologists of our time. Why could that be the case? And I really want you to take that one in. How much consciousness versus unconscious processes are going on every single second in our mind and in the human body? Someone tried to calculate this from an information theoretic point of view, and he came up with a measurement that conscious processes are like 10 mbit per second, while the total thing is like 10 to the power of 5 mbits a second. So this literally means that we as the human body are 99.99+% subconscious, unconscious processes that go on every second. Or put differently, our unconscious has a way higher working memory and processing power than consciousness, a single number, a single measurement. This is why feeling, gut feeling, intuition is so powerful. Take the martial artists, the free jazz players, or the chess players of our time. How do they become such experts? They put in the hard work, the hours and hours and hours and hours of conscious training, and then, when they are finally reached the level of expertise that they reach, it's all unconscious, right? You ask them what they are actually doing while they perform, while they do these high performance things that they do, and they're just in the flow, right? They're no longer conscious of what they're doing, they just perform. Sometimes these people even claim to not being able to recall what they did at all during their performances, right? They just are. They just are what they practice. Subconscious processing power. So, I want to close with a great saying by Friedrich Nietzsche from Thus Spoke Zarathustra. The body is a great sage, and many with one purpose. A war and a peace, a flock and a shepherd. There's more sense in thy body than in thy best wisdom. We need to get back in touch with ourselves, with our intuition, with our gut feeling, and live in a symbiosis with the data, in a symbiosis with all the quantifications that's out there, and not make data and quantifications our God, but be in a balance, just as James said. Thank you very much.